name is Amanda Harding. I lead Convene. I am really happy to see everybody around our virtual table today for our listening session webinar. So if that's where you think you're meant to be, great, do stay with us. If it's where you're not sure you're meant to be, you can stay with us as well. That's also fine. It's also great to see a lot of familiar faces, some less familiar faces, to see people who've got up early in the morning to join us, but also for people whose evening it is as well. We've really got a little bit of a sort of a global group coming together, and that's also just fantastic to have. If you want to put your cameras on, go ahead. It means that we just get to see who's around. I also totally get it that it's not always easy to do. It might also just not be the right time of day. You might be eating lunch at the same time. That's also fine. In these 45 minutes, please do activate your fingers on the Zoom chat as much as you like, given it's so short. Your comments, your questions, throw them in there. I'll give a very short overview of what the listening sessions are, well, why they are, what they are, and how they operate. But most of the time, I really want to give to Tamina, to Lena, and to Namakolo to actually share their experience, their insights, their advice on how to really mobilize this methodology. They have been actively involved in trying it out since 2023. And that's why we brought them into the webinar today. And then we'll have a little bit of time. We hope to make as much time as possible. This is Convene's way of doing things, to have some dialogue space in around the last 10 minutes. We'll also be putting a lot of links into the Zoom chat as we go. So when we refer to things, if you want to pick them up off the links off the Zoom chat, go ahead and do that. Gosh, we have a whole load of people. This is all very surprising. You never know what's going to happen in any of these things. And again, for those who have just joined, a huge welcome. Familiar, less familiar faces. This is just a total gift to me that you have joined us today. I'm going to jump straight in because I've got about 5 minutes just to set this up. And I really wanted to take a moment to talk about why we want to actually talk about listening sessions and what they are and how they operate. And I'm going to do something which is not what my colleagues from Convene probably expect. You know, that I've had the voices of my colleagues in my ear asking me to present the listening session offer as one of Convene's off-the-shelf methodologies that has proven itself as a great response to many of your needs and challenges. The thing is, I'm going to take a slightly different pathway on this and frame the listening sessions as one, if a small one, response to the dominant narrative of transactional strongman-led agreements that we're all living right now. Those that know me probably aren't too surprised that I'm actually giving this and placing this within a wider context. The context of the world is really tricky from any way that you look at it. The space is polluted by noise that drowns out the more progressive and often hard to be heard voices. And yet the nature of these challenges, the polycrisis that we often talk about, points to a compelling need to really listen, to challenge existing power relations, and to enable common understanding, alignment, and multi-actor driven solutions. I think we can't assume that we know best, and yet under pressure, sometimes out of habit, and often, and I talk for myself here, from our positions of power, we often act as if we do know what's best for others. So with the space to be really heard increasingly diminishing, listening sessions offer a methodology to really listen to those on the front line of action, on the front line of change, to adjust partnership dynamics and to collaborate for deeper and broader impact. So as I've said, I've tried to be clear about, from my point of view, why these are important. We'll come back and hear from Namakolo, from Lena, and from Tameen about why they think listening sessions are important for them. But in short, the listening sessions do ask, how can we do better together? And that, to me, again, seems to be so relevant today. They create the conditions to explore responses to this question of how can we do better together. The what of the listening sessions, and maybe we can just go on to the next slide. The what of the listening sessions is that they are a series of intimate single stakeholder sessions held over 1 week and carefully prepared, carefully facilitated, and with a real focus on impact and collaboration. And this is what we've tried to show here, that listening sessions they take place over 1 week, but the whole process is only a 6-week process. And you'll hear in a moment how this is actually being put into practice, both by IDRI and by the CGIAR. How does this happen? Well, in the next slide, you can see the deep dive into what that 1 week looks like. Listening sessions are framed always by the same intent, each one by the same questions, these impact and collaboration questions, but they start where the invitees are, where their strategies are, and where their priorities are. We sense make, we try and understand all the way through that week. We're building a picture all the way through that week, and we involve the broader hosting team, what I call the bookends, right at the beginning of the week, and also through that sense making, we feed that back, we reflect that back to the hosting team at the end of the week, because it's their partners who are going to take, and working with them, that they're going to take this forward. What's key with the listening sessions is that they require respect and empathy. They require real respect, as I said, and empathy, but also they need to be free of judgment. This is part of that positioning. And again, we'll hear a little bit about it later, which is really tricky. How do you position yourself as the hosting organization, so that you're not defensive, that you're not wanting to say, but we always did this, I hear what you're saying, but actually just to absorb that, to really listen, and then to understand, and then to move forward, and maybe probe a little bit more, but to still move forward. So they encourage us to question our assumptions, to delve into complex issues, and to pull the collective intelligence that builds shared insights. At the end of any listening session process, we would hope that the participants who have been involved, as you can see in that 1 week, you've got here a group of, whether they are philanthropies or society organizations, policymakers, private sector, think tanks and academia, those different stakeholder groups, that they actually receive quite quickly feedback, that they get a sense of what has been heard, what we think we have heard, those key messages over that week, on the opportunities for greater collaboration and impact. So, as I said, that is, in a nutshell, what we're talking about here, this how can we do better together idea, and what it takes in terms of, I think what some people today are calling deep listening, what in Convene we're often calling deliberate dialogue through these series of intimate conversations. That's just the big overview of the whole piece. And again, we'll share these slides, and as Ali has put into the chat, we actually have what we're calling, a pitch deck, if you like. This is the bit when I meant to get more commercial and say it's an offer. It gives a sense of what we're talking about, the why, the what, and the how of the listening sessions. I guess the other piece that comes with it, and maybe we'll hear a little bit in a moment, is that what we've developed behind this is a toolkit, what we've called a booster kit. And we've also developed booster sessions, the training sessions that can actually build capacity of those who are involved all the way through. So not only are we looking to create greater impact through better collaboration together, but also to create opportunities to build and develop capacity for this type of partnering and listening. So it's really looking at partnering in a new and innovative way as well. On that, let's move on Again, put your questions, your comments right in there into the chat. But I'd like to introduce at this point, for me, dear friends, but also dear colleagues. So Namakodo Kovic, who has amazingly managed to extract herself from the regional meeting for the preparation of the UN Food System Summit plus full stock take that is happening for Africa in Nairobi right now. And so she's sitting in Nairobi. Namakulu is going to be with us. Should be on screen somewhere. Lena, who is also with us, sitting in Paris. I'll introduce each of you and tell you a little bit more about them in a moment. And then Tamina Lalani Sharif, who is sitting in Abu Dhabi. So again, as I said, we've got a little bit of a global group here. I've asked them to come and share their thoughts with a little bit of intentionality as why there's these three brilliant women. First of all, it's just great to have them, as I said, alongside me, but also to hear from them. My suggestion, I love it, they're popping up one by one on my screen. This is excellent. Hello, ladies. My suggestion is that we just get a sense that why the three of you, and let me just introduce each of you just briefly. So Tamina is here very much as the former CGIAR Regional Director for South Asia, but also as somebody who's just started at Global Health Visions as a Director for Climate Health and Development. So first of all, congratulations, Tamina, on your new job. The importance to have Tamina in the room is that we first tested the listening session methodology in 2023-24 with the CGIAR as they started to develop their new research portfolio. Tamina will tell us more about that. She'll tell us more about the 27 country level listening session weeks, how we did it, why we did it, etc. But she was really the spearhead of starting this off. Namakodo is sitting there as the CGI and ILRI's Director General's representative to Ethiopia and the CGI country convener for Ethiopia, but also particularly as the person who was willing to do the very first pilot of listening sessions in Ethiopia before we actually then rolled that out in the 25 other countries. We did 2 pilots, one in Ethiopia and one in Peru at the end of 2023. And then in a very short period, we did all the other countries and a couple of regions. Namakodo has also been championing, supporting and inspiring listening sessions across the continent as well. So he's not restricted that into Ethiopia. And lastly, Lena Spinazzi is the Deputy Director of IDRI, a Paris-based think tank, and is currently leading IDRI's development of its 2026-30 strategy. And somehow, I'm still not sure how, Lena managed to convince her leadership team peers that listening sessions would anchor the strategy both in current realities, but also in challenging existing partnerships and build new partnerships, which she seems to think are essential in this evolving geopolitical landscape in 2025. So we're starting to see a little bit of an arc. On the screen, we've got the 3 questions I put to you. I'm not going to read them out right now. I'm just going to ask you to tell your listening session stories, to try and actually then ask those questions, but also ask questions of each other, because that's what we started to do when we got together last week. So do just go ahead and interrogate each other, and then I actually can be a little bit more quiet. Tamina, let's start with you, though, as a person that got this going in 2023. What's your story?
Oh, okay. Thanks, Amanda. Actually, as you were giving that great introduction, and thank you for that. Welcome to everybody, and thank you for having me. It just got me thinking about, way back in 23 when we did start. And if you'll indulge me, I would love to just throw up a little, just a little slide that we've got. I don't know if Maggie can maybe help me to put that up, but this is basically just a little infographic, if you will, of what the CG experience was. And really, this was born out of the need to bring the voices and perspectives of our stakeholders further into the research portfolio and really embed them more deeply into the research portfolio. As we began to plan the new research portfolio that is just in the process of launching, actually, we recognized that, to your point, Amanda, about the poly crisis, one of the key pieces of that is the need for further localization and to really be able to listen to the needs and demands of our countries that we work in and what they needed in terms of good, strong research. And so this will just give you a really quick idea of how we went through it, what we accomplished, why we did it, starting at the left-hand side and moving all the way through to what the outputs were. Like Amanda alluded to, we did 27 countries in 4 months. It was not a singular team. It was through the booster sessions and through the internal capacity development within the CG that enabled that. And I think the most important piece that came out of that were the 2 different reports. One was a report designed specifically for the researchers and scientists that were going to go off and write the research portfolio, and they used that as a reference piece. And then the other piece that came out was a report that went back to the stakeholders and sort of parroted back to them what we had heard and gave them an opportunity to react to that. And I thought that that was a really important part of the methodology. You know, when you ask sort of why did we choose this methodology? It was really that. It was a chance to sit quietly in a room and really listen deeply, but also to be able to create a rolling conversation with these stakeholders. So I'll just stop there, and I can't wait to hear from the rest.
Thank you so much. Namakri, do you want to jump in and sort of complement with what actually really took place and anchor that in the Ethiopian experience? And I think also what's interesting, I was reflecting on it myself, is also how you were able to support the other country teams who also were carrying out listening sessions in Africa as well.
Yeah, well, for us in Ethiopia, we were starting with a context where there had been quite a number of interactions that took place, not really using the listening model per se, but doing a lot of consultations, trying to listen to stakeholders and like. So the idea then of not saying what we think we can bring, but just to listen then became very attractive because it offered a different way of doing things. And so what we then set out to do is build on the previous consultations that we had had and actually have, you know, kind of some messaging from there of where we ourselves felt we had not done a good job. And then have that as an opening way of encouraging people to actually speak their mind in the listening session, because you started off by not really giving yourself accolades, but saying, look, here's where I think I have messed up, but I really want to hear more. Are there things that you want to say to us? And so that set the scene for a very open discussion where people actually let go of their guards and actually simply told you what they wanted to tell you without putting too much decorations around it. And so moving forward then, that actually became, the interesting thing is that the relationships around the stakeholders that we spoke to actually became stronger. And I think more open, if you will, because it was like, it's okay to actually tell them they've messed up and they will listen, or it's okay for us to question and it is okay. So that's some of the advantages that I have seen based on the way in which the listening sessions were approached. So this structure that Amanda showed us of having the first internal meeting and then finishing with an internal, then came about so that first we could say something to set the scene of where we thought we were not doing very well. And then after that, internally finish off by saying, what have we heard? What does that mean? And for me, listening is really about listening. Often we tend to go to meetings because somebody has invited you to present something. And I think it's the wrong reason to go to meetings. We should go to meetings to listen to what people have to say if they want us to say something that's different. But I think by listening, then you can come back home and look at your own messages but you can now reconstruct them in the context of what you have heard. Let me stop there. I can talk about this forever.
Just to mute myself. I love hearing you talking about it, Namakura. As you can see, I'm putting a few of my reactions straight into the chat because I can't really stop myself. So for me, I love the idea that we're picking up this idea of how, as host organizations, we actually make ourselves vulnerable. It's a very unusual position to actually find ourselves in by this listening posture, and it takes a little bit of preparation. It takes some risk taking as well. And so there's a whole area about what does that actually bring into our relationships and our own capacity to do that. And at the same time, the concrete value, we actually have real concrete products coming out of this. We have something that actually we would not have had without the listening sessions as well. Maybe, Lena, you can pick up on how what you've done in IDRI and how this is still work in progress. You're right in your listening session experience right now. So it's fresh, as opposed to for Tamina and Namakura, which it feels like, again, for me as well, this part of it's like, oh my God, we did this so long ago. It was only in 2024, but it feels like a long time ago. Go ahead, Lena.
Yes, with pleasure. I'm very pleased to be with you today. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I have to say that I'm quite impressed by the multi-countries processes that you just talked about. Our process is more modest, but very important for us. And as you just mentioned, Amanda, we are still in the process, so not finished yet. We're working at the moment on our next 5-year strategy, as you mentioned. And the main question is, for a sustainability think tank like ours, is to find our impact pathway in the Trump era, more or less. This is the question we're asking ourselves. So quite a difficult question, I have to say. And so for us, we really wanted it, on one side, it was very important, of course, to mobilize our own internal team around this very difficult objective. And of course, it was also very important to involve our partners, our stakeholders. And so this is why we designed with Convene a whole process combining internal and external approaches. And the listening sessions were the first round of listening sessions were a part of this. So we organized them at the end of January, so just 1 week after Trump came to power. So it was a very strong moment, I mean, for all our stakeholders. And then we had an internal retreat last week to talk about to build on the results of these listening sessions. And we are going to have another round around September, October to test the impact pathways that we have developed. So this is our process. In terms of added value, I have to say that I couldn't imagine before organizing the listening sessions and the whole process, the whole range of added values that it would bring to us. I mean, I think this is really, really strong. And just for the moment to cite 2 of them, but I have other ones. One of them is that you already mentioned, I mean, the Namukolo, the power of really listening rather than just speaking. But on top of that, I would really say that on top of listening, of course, which is very important, it was really for us a way to engage our partners and to ask them the question, what can we do together in order, yes, to have an impact together in this Trump era or in this difficult context that we're facing at the moment, I mean, everywhere in the world. And this really made a difference because very often when we talk to partners or to our different governance bodies and so on, they tell us about what we should do, what you should do is blah, blah, blah. And then this was really about what we can do together. So this really made a difference. And I think it's going to make a difference also in the long run. We can come back to this. And the second added value I would like to point already now is the fact that building on listening to our external stakeholders was really a very strong driver for internal change. And within 6 months, you cannot imagine the kind of internal change that we've managed to have, especially on transversalities, because as in many organizations, we have this silo problem. And so really now something has changed, I mean, in reality and not only on the paper. And I think this was really thanks to these listening sessions.
Again, Lena, thank you so much. And I love this, you know, as a strong driver for internal change, where we know that internal change and that slightly disruptive internal change for transformative change, as opposed to incremental change, is tricky for any organization. And so as an enabler towards that, as well as, you know, on the external side, and, you know, Lena and I were just last week in an IDRI retreat, and we saw that power coming out, being able to refer to what we'd heard, or we thought we heard, and I always frame it in what we thought we heard in the listening sessions, gave so much more credibility and strength to the strategic direction that IDRI is going to be taking. And that's absolutely crucial. I would like to give each of you now, you only get 1 minute though, 1 minute for that third question that we put to you, the looking forward question. If you were going to employ listening sessions again, why would you and what would you do? Why would you, first of all, would you bother? And then what would you do differently? And maybe let's switch the order around a little bit and let's ask Namakodo to start on this one. Putting you on the spot, Namakodo.
I think what I would do differently, Amanda, is I think I would prepare better for the listening sessions. Having done them once, I value more the preparation of both myself and the team I would do listening sessions with to be more prepared about this whole concept of listening and not having to say anything. Because I think even the quality of the note taking would be different if you feel you are actually there to listen. So I would prepare better as a collective of the people that are working with me to facilitate the event. That's one thing I would do different. The other thing, if I may quickly, because I'm sitting here at the UN Food Systems Summit meetings, somebody said to me, oh, so you're making a presentation? Yeah, sure. I have a session, but it's actually structured more or less as a listening session. But the rest of my participation in the whole event is really here to listen. Because somebody said to me, yeah, but why don't you do this or do that? And with the exception of this one, I've been saying no to everything because I've been saying I've actually come to listen. And there is the difference between rushing in to make your presentation and running out 5 minutes later. You've not been part of the conversation. You really came to make your presentation and to go away. And so I'm beginning to use the listening session almost as a new vocabulary of I've come to listen, I'm going to listen. And because people around me have been through those listening sessions, they don't quirk. There's sort of like a common understanding of she wants to listen, leave her alone. So yeah, thanks.
No, that's, I mean, first of all, of course, it's great to hear that this language is starting to be socialized, but also that you are inhabiting it, you are living it. And I guess for everybody else who's around our table. It's important to hear that from Namakolo, who is actually one of the shapers and leaders of UNFSS Plus for the UN Food System Summit Stocktake happening in Addis at the end of July. So to have somebody who is listening so intently to then help shape that is really significant. 1 minute to you, Lena. I'm trying the 1 minute thing. It's really hard with the three of you. It's hard with me as well. Try 1 minute on your looking forward piece.
Okay, I'll try. So as I said, we're going to have another one in September, October, and working really on testing our impact pathways. And I think the two things I would do differently is first to try to have as possible in-person meetings in order to work more and more on this engagement part first. And second, I would also propose them a yearly meeting, yearly rendezvous, in order really to engage them on the long term, and in order to really have stakeholders helping us staying, agile, adapted to our context. Yes.
That's perfect. And just maybe just a little clarification for everybody with the CGIAR listening sessions, 27 countries, a couple of regions, they were all in person. And as much as we could, we tried to encourage the CGIAR centers to take those listening sessions into the stakeholder spaces themselves, not even have them necessarily within their meeting room or their common meeting room. Sometimes it was possible, sometimes it wasn't. With IDRI, they were hybrid, largely virtual, because they were often as well multiple geographical locations in that virtual space. But it makes them very different. Again, I'm saying it because it shows that we have a methodology here that can be adapted for different needs in different contexts, depending on what it is that you're really looking for, given that we know that we're all looking to deepen collaboration for greater impact. Tamina, you get another minute.
Okay, so first I have to laugh at Namakolo inhabiting the listening sessions, because I just think that that's an excuse for every good introvert to sit quietly in a room. But I'm totally with you. I can relate. In terms of what would I do differently going into the future, I have to say I'm gonna push back a little bit against that question, because my best recommendation would be to not necessarily change anything, but to really stay true to the methodology. So to Namakolo's point, and we had a conversation about this earlier, where you had said you wanted more time to prepare. I'm not necessarily sure that more time for you to prepare would have helped. I think that for us going through it at the CG, what was the real learning for me was the need for internal change management. This was a methodology. Like, keep in mind, you're dealing with a whole whack of researchers and scientists spread across the world. And for them, methodology is everything. And this was a methodology that didn't necessarily have that scientific backing to it. And yet, kind of getting them to a point where they could trust that this was going to turn out okay, that we were actually going to get some insights, that there was actually something different and unusual to hear from these sorts of structured sessions as opposed to other facilitated sessions that we had done in the past. That took time and that took energy. And so if I was to do anything in the future, I would account for enough time to kind of bring the organization along with you. Especially an organization the size of CG. I think that's really important. And then the other thing I would do in the future differently in terms of sticking to, again, in the same vein of sticking to the methodology, is really the intention of these listening sessions with the CG was for it to be repeated every year for the duration of the research portfolio. So at one point, I think it was in Ethiopia, actually, Namakolo, we had one of the stakeholders say to us, oh, so if you're coming back again next year to do a listening session, this is an opportunity for us to course correct on the research portfolio as it advances over the next 5 years or whatever it was we were looking at. That was really gold to me, because I think that that creates that opportunity for continuous improvement. And then if you'll allow me, I would say one last thing that I would do in the future, and again, it's part of staying true to the methodology, there was this intense desire to quantify the outcomes from the listening sessions, and to attach a survey to it, or to, and I think that that detracts from the beauty of what's been gathered. I think there's really something to be said for the social science methodology that's been attached to this. And so I would stay true to that again and not resist the urge to kind of attach quantitative metrics to this as well, other than just knowing the number of countries you went to see and how many stakeholders you met with, maybe. But I'm not even sure that that has real value, other than it just helps people get their head around the scope of it.
Camilla, thank you so much. We've got, I don't know, 9 minutes, I think, if my calculation's right in front of us. I do want to make sure that we have a little bit of time to open up to questions and comments. Questions and comments to Tamina, Namakole, and Lena, but questions and comments to all of us as a group. So Maggie, can you unpin us, and so that we actually have everybody back on the screen, or maybe, here we go, we're now going to disappear and maybe come back again. Use your Zoom hands, put your hands up, put something in the chat, shout out, but would love just to hear, how this is resonating for you. If you think this is something that you could or you would want to pick up in your organization, but maybe there are questions that come up about its usability or not, go for it. Oh, straight away. Brigitte, do you want to just go, and would love to hear your voice.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. And this, I love all aspects of it. So I'll just go straight into my question, because I find that fascinating. And the key thing that that hangs in my head is, as you're discussing how we can do things better as a key question, which is critical, how do you assume that there's an understanding of what we are trying to do together in itself as the beginning of the session, and how this, at least what we try to do together, is clear, and how can we do it better, if my question makes sense?
Your question makes lots of sense. Let me just see if there are any other questions before I actually then maybe go to, for example, Lena or Tamina or Namakole to give their answers to that, because I think we actually have real answers on that one. Lena, do you want to give that a go? This idea of, in terms of our starting point, how do we actually know at the beginning if we really want to do better together? How we actually dealt with that with our IDRI listening sessions.
Yeah, you mean how do we ensure that we are on the same page as our stakeholders, friends, partners who are here? I think this is, for us, it really relied on 2 points. First, on the kind of questions that we were asking them that were very, very simple. As a think tank, we often send concept notes and so on with lots of ideas, analyses, and so on before we're having a discussion. And here we were really on very open and engaging, once again, questions. So I think this was a first way to set really our intention. And the other one really was to start by a 5-minute introduction by our director, and then we didn't say anything more. With really two internal people co-animating with Amanda and another woman from her team, with 2 people from IDRI taking notes and so on. So they were really seeing that, yes, 6 people were really there to really take advantage on their thoughts and contributions.
Yeah, Lena, thank you. So this is exactly it. I think, we really, for every listening session in whatever context, we've always put the emphasis on actually being able to frame it, and the framing, whether it was IDRI or with any of the CGIAR countries, started with a framing about what our understanding is of where you are, as well as where we are in relation to strategies and priorities anchored in reality. And then from there, moving into those common questions around impact and collaboration. I don't know if that's answered your question enough, Brigitte, but again, this idea of setting up the conversation, and that takes preparation. That doesn't happen easily. It does take some thought. Was really important, continues to be important.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Great. Myrti, do you want to actually shout out your question rather than writing it down? Because we've still got a few more minutes.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much. I've heard of this through Patrick Caron and Makit, so I was very eager to listen to this. So I've become an independent consultant, and I work with universities, global organizations like the CGs, or sometimes smaller R&Ds. And yes, disallowing insights and needs and etc. We all understand how needed that is. The key is, how do you convince those tight budgets to open for the sessions to happen? As in, like, you know, employing consultants to facilitate, help, articulate all of those things.
Great question, and I can see that Alejandra has asked very similar question to Tamina. What was the final point that made the click inside the organization to embrace the listening sessions? How do you move into that? This internal shift piece as well. Tamina, do you want to give that a stab in terms of to answer that broadly as well as the CGIAR experience? You were right there in the global leadership team at the time.
Yeah, so just I think you're both asking really, really important questions, and I think there's aspects to them that are similar. So one of the things that helped in the way that we approached it with the CG was that we did 2 prototypes early in the session, early before we kicked off the whole 27 countries. And those 2 prototypes, we did one in Ethiopia and one in Peru. We funded those out of our regions and partnerships budget. So they were really funded within the department that was responsible for regional engagement. This was money that, you know, my boss put up for it. Mine and Namakolo's boss put up for it. Those prototypes, though, really allowed us to be able to point to evidence that once we were documenting them, we were able to point to evidence that showed that we had gathered outputs and feedback that was different from what scientists and researchers had gotten in other facilitations. So that was really key. But even in terms of the question of how do you make it click in the organization, or how did we actually get around to doing the bigger piece, that was really rooted in tying it back to the organization's strategic objectives. And there's 2 pieces to that. One was that we had been sort of mandated as we were building this new research portfolio. We had come under a lot of criticism for our lack of localization, our lack of engaging stakeholders in the co-creation of the portfolio. And so this was what we were able to do was to go to the senior leadership team and to actually demonstrate how this was going to answer one of their biggest strategic challenges, if you will. And so that helped us in that way. And then afterwards, as we were developing the research portfolio, there was another round of criticism, in fact, from many of our funders that, again, we were not listening to our stakeholders. And so the ability to point to the listening sessions, to be able to point to the methodology, to be able to point to how deeply personal and honest and authentic some of that feedback was, really helped us to demonstrate how this was so very different from other workshops that we had gotten and other outputs that we had gotten. So that was the piece that helped. But I think writ large as a consultant, I think the more that you could kind of ground it in the strategic objectives and in the opportunity to really hear maybe smaller groups, but honest and authentic feedback, that became a real driver for many of our folks around the decision-making tables.
Tamina, thank you so much.
I think maybe if I can add quickly, Amanda, is that one of the issues was also that once those 2 pilot countries were done, there was a deliberate effort to engage with the other country conveners discussing the value of what had been done. And in fact, we got, I think, a lot more countries wanting to do the listening sessions because the people in the countries, the country conveners actually found them very useful and felt it was something that was missing. And so I think for many countries, it became more a challenge of resources and the amount of time we had to do the listening session than lack of will. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Namakura. Absolutely, Yami. You're taking me back to actually how we actually built up collectively that trust and momentum, and it became something actually that people felt left out if they were not part of, because the value became self-evident. And it's a really important question. All of these questions are important, but we're already a minute over the end, which is a little bit frustrating, but intentionally we wanted to keep the webinar down to 45 minutes because we know that you are all super busy. We have more questions that are coming up in the chat. Lena, Tamina, Namakura, Maggie, please continue. Ismail, all of you who've been involved in listening sessions, please continue getting your comments into the chat as I try and wrap up with the last slide, which is going to miraculously appear. Thank you very much. First of all, I'm going to give a huge round of applause.
Ishmael, can I ask that you save the chat, because then that will give a chance for us to look at it afterwards? Thanks.
Absolutely. You get the chat, you get everything. So Namakura is already 5 steps ahead of me to be able to say, we will be sending everybody who has been with us today an email. You'll get it by the end of the day. It will have with it the slides from today, the links to everything that you're seeing on the screen, including Namakura's brilliant interview that we have here as well, that we just put on LinkedIn last week. You will get the deck itself, our formal pitch deck, how to get in touch with us. I'll make sure, Namakura, that also we share the chat between, with yourself, with Tamina, and with Lena, so that we can get back to people. And also the most important thing is just get back in touch. Easiest person to get in touch with is normally me, but otherwise anybody in the Convene team, so that we can continue to talk and to explore how to bring the listening sessions to life, into reality, with the work that you're doing, however you're doing the work. We're a couple of minutes late, so I am going to once more thank you for being with us. Maybe we'll take the slides off. If everybody just wants to put their cameras on, if they feel like it, then we can see each other. I'm just excited to see all these great people. And wish you a great rest of your day, and those who are heading for breakfast, and those who are also heading for their afternoon tea, and everybody in between. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you,
Thank
Amanda.
you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Amanda.
Amanda, thank
Thank you,
all.
Amanda.